I'm Shazeen. I am from the marketing team, and I am going to moderate this webinar for Mr. Vinod, who is an experienced champ in the industry for about 15 years. And today he's going to speak on supply chain finance and how large enterprises could potentially support suppliers during these dire times during COVID, if I have to spell it out for you. But I think everyone knows what's happening in the industry. And he is going to run you through some companies who have actually made initiatives, and it's more of a vision as well as something that we are able to do today for large enterprises. I am going to hand it over to Mr. Vinod. Vinod, are you ready?
Yes, Shazeen, I'm there actually. Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, people, wherever you're joining from. Let me know whenever you're good to start.
All right, Vinod, I think we're good to start. Let's go ahead. And for everyone who is looking for a rerun to this whole webinar, it will be posted on our website immediately after the session. On to you, Vinod.
Yeah, so thank you, Shaz. And as I said again, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining in. I hope, if not 90%, maybe 70% of the participants and audience on this webinar are joining from home, because as of last Friday, the figure shows that half of the world population is under restricted movement, or now so-called the lockdown. So while you are playing your part in helping break the chain of infection, there is a whole lot of people out there playing their crucial part to make sure the essential goods and services are available and running in time of this need actually. And that's where the importance of global supply chain, which is more collaborative, transparent, financially healthy, becomes very, very inevitable. So just to go ahead and then set the context actually, right? So while all this is happening, there are challenges in the global supply chain, and if you really look at it, that is not really the case actually, because the vulnerability in the cross-border supply chain has been exposed, and maybe exposed again actually, and thanks to COVID-19. Now, what has also happened is because of the global pandemic, actually, which has brought people's movement, in the local and the global market, and the connectivity to a complete standstill, actually. Now, and it's just impacting every one of us, in whichever part of the world you are, across the globe, continent, far or near, everybody's, is absolutely impacted. Now, look at this. In the context of a global supply chain, how it is now impacted actually, right? So if you look at the provenance in South Korea, which has been the epicenter of initial COVID-19 outbreak actually, which happens to host the manufacturing facility of Samsung, has completely gone in a lockdown actually, right? Or if you really see few of the apparel brands with 30 to 40% of semi-processed goods actually, supplied in the global apparel industry, which are coming from China, most of them may not be even able to launch their next summer collection, if you have been waiting for that actually, right? Or even in an automotive industry, if you look at it, with almost all the big boys shifting their complete attention to make ventilators, to aid their nations or, country wherever they are, having manufacturing plants from. And then similarly for other services industry, electronic equipments, travel and logistic, and so on and so forth actually. So now, if you really look at it in short, COVID has been the biggest and the ugliest supply chain disruptor, of this decade actually. Now, if you really move on, and I'm just trying to make a point here that if you, here are some more inputs if you think it is not yet too bad. If you look at this picture, as China went into shutdown sometime in the mid of or January, many manufacturing plants completely halted their work actually, and this region of China, which is particularly known for some serious air pollution. This satellite image shows how it was reduced over a period of just 2 to 3 weeks, with completely productions getting seized actually. Now, if you look at this picture, actually, visibility and transparency across the supplier network has always been very crucial, and more when disruptions like this happens actually. So that others in the downstream can plan and take early actions, if they are able to have a good visibility into the supply network to take some mitigations of the upcoming risk actually. But I think that's what's happened in the current situation of COVID, where large part of the globe and the global supply chain having a dependency on China for their raw material or either semi-finished goods got affected, either sooner or later actually, right? And maybe just the last one, if you see on this one, so while the coronavirus has reached all our states and districts and the city much later in the pandemic cycle, the news itself has started creating a lot of havoc, impacting us first maybe financially, and then now psychologically. So having said that, with all this happening around us, disruption is in the global supply chain has already been exposed actually, right? But it's not that supply chain experts haven't been working on, and they have been maybe on all the dimensions of vulnerability listed in this slide by McKinsey, but maybe building something which is specifically for making the supply chain financially resilient seems to be ignored, or maybe not prioritized, or maybe the supply chain experts have left it for the treasury and the finance department to deal with actually. So one solution that has always been able to support and can support companies facing this situation around the strain time in the working capital and cash flow is in their network is supply chain finance actually, right? And once seen as a niche solution actually, maybe years ago, supply chain finance has definitely gained lots and lots of traction, particularly in and from the financial crisis in 2008, when companies acted to support their suppliers and thereby prevent their own disruption actually, right? Now, in the current context scenario, right, when the cash reserves of the small suppliers in your supplier network are drying up, we will see a lot of smaller business starting to ramp down and even fold actually, right? So now, given that context, the supply chain financing has again become very, very important tool actually, that can help your supplier to assess early financing for working capital within days actually, instead of weeks or months, as they try to stay in business in this current highly competitive environment actually, right? So given that as a context actually, right, the point is where organization really struggle to deal with all those vulnerability, and then particularly the financial resilience actually, right? So if you look at it, organizations have been having many more challenges and all of that, but if you look at a couple of points that I tried putting around, either there is a mismatch between the priorities that procurement and the treasury have, because procurement might be focused on achieving some cost savings and maybe hence required to work with a particular supplier actually, but treasury department may have their own focus to help improve the cash flows of the supplier network actually, right? Or maybe if you look at point number 2, a lot of organizations have challenge, in terms of understanding the working capital need, within their network, correctly, and the challenge there is always the visibility and transparency that you have with your supplier, not only tier 1 but tier 2 and tier 3 supplier actually, right? Or if you look at it, organizations, right, who have maybe subscribed for a supply finance platform or a program together with a lender actually, right? That is where the place has always been dominated by. There has been limitations from the lender itself in terms of providing the required supply chain financing requirement of their supplier because of either the KYC requirements, the credit scoring, or maybe even actually the lending rates actually are not really supportive to what really the program is need to make it successful actually, right? So having said that, the point is how organizations are really taking charge, whether big or small, and now with the advent of new technologies, it has made all the resources, all the required resources and platform available, and in reach of all these companies actually to build and run their own supply financing network actually, right? And that is how the scenario and the space is absolutely getting changed as we speak, right? So what are we really trying to say, right? So we are saying that that's where organization have started out there to take lead and build their supplier financing program, not only limiting to tier 1 but maybe a multi-tier supply financing program, by taking into consideration their suppliers' privacy, which has always been the challenge, and now technology is something which is able to address that, to make sure that the required privacy between the supplier is respected, and people are able to keep information what they keep, and then share what is really required to make the program really successful actually. And then obviously now because we are seeing the organization taking lead here rather than a bank or a logistic company, the organizations are able to then work with multi-bank environment actually, right? Which they deal with typically rather than a single lender with whom they are stuck up in other KYCs actually, right? So with that as a strong point actually, is it that organization has not been able to build, and if they are really now looking to build their own supplier financing network actually, here are some points that they can actually look at, which are worth considering actually, right? So some of them, if you really look at it, something platform that you're really trying to look or build, something that is which you're able to quickly launch in your supplier network, because it has become very, very critical in the current context of scenario and even moving forward actually. So you need to look at a platform which is something very quick. You can roll it out, build the ecosystem, and then start decimating, and then rolling out the program as soon as possible actually. Or even you look at it from a digital platform perspective, you really want to look at something which is seamlessly can integrate with your internal system of records, and can be end-to-end digital, where the touchless experience is something which can be really given to the users around actually, right? Or even if you look at it, something that can bring authenticity to each transaction in the network while giving the required transparency, because you have banks and multi-banks into the network who really want to build in the transparency, and so on and so forth actually, right? So having said that, and then obviously a few more points, right? To make sure that the data and the privacy is being shared actually, right? Performance credit, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so Yeah, so these are the few points, right? Which are just worth considering when you're really looking at launching one or two of your program, so to say. And there are many more you can look at it. Now, if you look at the last point, actually, right? It is more about you really looking at what are the low-hanging fruits, which are the program that you really want to launch first. But then our submission would be that don't look at going and restricting yourself with one or two solution offering, but then look at a platform that can really take you in a longer journey, something you can really launch much more solutions, build, and then keep on building what is out there actually, right? So with that, what is it that we really want people on in the community to really look at it actually, right? What is the call of action, right, to our friends in treasury, finance and procurement department, so to say? The first and foremost thing is start now actually, right? Because there is no better time than this, when global trade and supply chains are going through and very unusual and massive shock actually, which are being struck from both sides. On one side from the supply side, and then on the other side from demand actually, right? So there is absolutely no better time than this, when you can really start looking into something which is really need of the hour actually, right? Because there is need to have definitely a secure interaction within counterparties, go and define your risk, and then work towards the mitigation now actually. So that is one thing that we definitely look at, to be something that you can start now, right? Looking at the other one, right? Now that technology is now more able to help and support you bring trust and visibility into the supply chain network actually, right? Because that is something which is at the heart of it actually, right? Organizations have gone ahead and launched their supply financing platform, but then only have stuck up to a tier one actually, right? The problem is always the visibility and transparency down there beyond tier one actually, when you really go to tier two and tier three, and that is something can only come if you're able to build trust onto the platform, and that is where technologies which are available now are able to help develop the trust into the entire ecosystem actually, for not only for you as a customer or a buyer actually, but even for your supplier to make this program very successful actually. And then finally start your journey, because it is a journey. It is not something that you really can or achieve and then move it on actually, but the idea is to really start now and then start with your journey, because all those best and proven technologies are available and available handy now, and which is more around people call it ABCD, which is more like an AI, blockchain, cloud and data. I mean, it has all become very consumable and available, so to say, right? So having said that, we at DLT Ledger can make it easy, faster, and hassle-free for you if you're looking to take this journey in the near or the mid term actually, right? And that is where we specialize, right, in terms of helping you build your supply financing network actually, right? Now so here is what you can launch as your private permission supply financing network actually, which is something which is owned and operated by you as an anchor customer, and you can go ahead and invite your participating banks, build your own network, not only in tier one actually, but you look at it building it in tier two and multi-tier supplier network actually. And I mean, that's where DLT Ledger can help you launch one which is strictly built on a ready plug and play kind of platform. And on the right hand side, what you see are the ready components of the supply chain finance platform that we have available, built on the technologies I mentioned around the ABCD, so to say actually, right? So so having said that, I'm just on my last slide, which is just to conclude. And while we are all hearing so much of bad news all over, there are definitely many good of them coming over actually, right? And and there are many more coming in, day in, as we go along. And the most important thing that you are able to go back and then see is that thanks to their operational supply chain, of these global organizations, who are still able to keep them running, while they are still strained, stretched beyond a point, trying to maintain their financial resiliency, but still they're able to make these organizations run, and run successfully, in the time of this crisis actually. Right. So here I take a pause and thank you all. Thank you for listening. Shaz, back to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Vinod, for sitting in for this webinar. I hope it was really clear to all of you guys what he was speaking on. If you do have any questions based off what he's spoken, we're going to keep the next 5 minutes open for people to come in and ask questions. Either you can speak or you can type it down in the chat, and I will have Vinod answer those questions for you.
Okay, so here is the first question actually. For the webinar, I can see Janelle asking me the question that Vinod, good to hear from you. Thanks for the session. What is DLT Ledger's engagement model actually, right? So from an engagement model perspective, right, we basically work with large organizations and enterprise customers actually to help them build their supplier finance network actually. Unlike the days where it was all being the platform was being done and run by the banks, so to say. So we have been working more closely to our corporate customers who really want to build their own network and then run a program for that actually, right? And ours is a SaaS enabled platform. We run it like a technology partner for you. It is owned by our customers and operated by our customers. We just work it as a technology partner to make it successful for you actually, right? So that's the answer. Okay, so we have another question: how fast to deploy such solutions and getting the partner on board actually, right? So yeah, I mean, it can take anything between 6 to 8 weeks to deploy or maybe to start with a supply financing network actually of your own, depending upon what are you really looking to launch day one actually. If it is on supplier, if it is on accounts payable financing, accounts receivable, invoice factoring, and so on and so forth. So depending upon what are you really looking to launch and then build as you go through as a journey, it is something that can be done within 6 to 8 weeks of time. And we have a ready component, which is something called supplier onboarding inbuilt with KYC module actually. So typically when you go after for banks, they have their own format in which they want to do their supplier onboarding and KYC. We have gone and consolidated actually those best practices out there and then made is a ready kit for banks to consume actually, right? So it is quite easy in terms of really going and then getting the supplier onboarded. And then the good thing is that once you're able to build one KYC kit actually for a bank, it's more about getting it consumed by the second and the third bank, so to say. So it becomes a reusable kit, so to say, rather than really going and doing an onboarding for each and every bank, all the time actually. Yeah, thank you.
So I have a couple of more questions for you, Vinod. From James Lan, if I read that right. How far are you in development stage? Is this something that you do today actively, or is it a vision? And another question I believe is linked to that is from Lee Kwan. He's asked, are you open for a demo? Do the partner banks support this like DBS and UOB?
Okay. Okay, so let me take the question in from James actually, right? So James, I mean, this is basically a ready plug and play platform actually, right? I can go back and then go on to this slide actually, which basically on the right hand side talk about the the configurable modules that we have on the platform, and that is where the entire beauty of the platform is actually, right, that you can really quickly configure these modules depending upon what is your requirement for your supplier finance network actually, right? And then and what are the criterias that you're working with which bank, and what are the prerequisite for them to have a minimum viable product actually, to make it live actually, right? So the point here is that it's a ready configurable platform, with all of it, which you can quickly bring it together and then make it live, right? So that's how it works actually, right? And when you said about the partner banks actually, from Liquan, the idea is you can, as I said, right, you can launch it as your private permissioned network, and then invite the participating banks which you are already dealing with, or as a DLT ledger on our cross-border trade digitization platform. We almost have 45 banks across Southeast Asia, India, Middle East, Africa, who are working as a global business partner actually, right? So so as a supplier actually, as a large organization, if you really want to leverage those banks who are already on the platform, that is something which can also be done actually, if you are really looking at that. Thank you.
I have a question from Elnaz. Sorry if I'm reading these names wrong. How do you secure that the customer is verified and is the one authorized to enter the transaction?
Yeah, so as I said, right, we have leveraged the so-called technology of ABCD, which is on the AI, blockchain, cloud, and data actually. So this entire platform and the modules that you see is purely built on blockchain actually, right? So and what you do is that it is on a it is basically a private permission network. So as a anchor customer, you are able to give permission access to the counterparties to log in and perform certain set of tasks and activities actually, right? And that limitation, we don't really leave it there. What we go ahead and then do is get the documentation, get the information, basically dynamically, digitally consented between the counterparties. So it becomes something which is shared across the counterparties, and then can be viewed by a third party on the permissioned access actually, right? So that is how that is being done.
There is a question from Lucy Chow. Briefly, what is the difference from your competition?
Yeah, so Lucy, I mean, as I said, right, supply chain finance is nothing new that is out there in the market now, right? It is just that it has been there for almost 2 decades, if I'm able to read things correctly. But I mean, first when it started getting very, very popular is around the 2008 financial crisis, where the organization have started feeling the challenge of this, and then went out and started supporting their supplier network actually, right? But then those were the platforms which were typically owned and run by the large lending institutions actually, or the banks out there, right? But if you look at it, what we are really talking about here is the platform which is now with the advent of technology is something which can be owned and operated by an anchor buyer actually, sitting at the core of it, and then build your own private network, and then invite the lending agencies, depending upon what is your network, or leverage on what the network is already able to give you, and then run it successfully in such a way actually, right? So the basic difference, the point I'm trying to tell you is that ours is more around working closely with the large and enterprise and the corporate customers with whom the platform sits closely and then run it actually. And in that space particularly, there's not much of competition that we are able to see, which is built on the latest of these technologies around the AI, blockchain, and so on and so forth actually. Thank you.
I see there's a question from Mr. Venkit. So that people who are new would be able to follow. Do you have reading materials for this? I would suggest you can reach out to me or anyone from the marketing department in dltledgers, and we'll be happy to provide materials that are based off what Vinod has spoken right now. I have a question from Ram Gopal Sharma. Do you feel this would be easier to set up during the next 6 months of COVID?
Ram, thanks for asking the question actually, right? Yeah, I mean, 6 months is a pretty long time, right? As I was just trying to tell earlier that depending upon what are you really trying to achieve from the platform day one, obviously it is not something that can be, with all feature functionality you want to go ahead with. So say, for example, right, you want to start with your accounts payable financing, with your set of tier 1 or tier 2 supplier network actually, right? It is something that can be launched in a period of roughly, depending upon the size of organization, in something around 6 to 8 weeks actually, right? And then maybe you can go ahead and then start adding on the solutions onto the platform, right? And that's where I said is that look at a platform that can help you go and then launch more solutions, be it on the accounts receivable financing, be it on digitizing that entire trade finance activities, which are currently very, very manual and paper driven, not only for you but for your suppliers as well, because we are talking about all these global connected supply chain which are spread all over across the globe, and those processes like the trade finance are very, very paper driven and manual in nature, right? So it is very much possible over the period of next 6 months, as you say. Look at it from what are your priorities with your treasury and the procurement departments, and then we'll be happy to help you around that. Thank you.
There are a few more questions. Mr. Tan Yen, replying to ABCD, would you explain what is the application of AI in the solution?
So I mean, as I mentioned, right, there's a lot of components which has worked in. Maybe Shaz, if you're okay, we can defer that question to our CTO to take it up accordingly.
Yeah, I think more the technical part of the questions, or the technical questions, I'm sorry. The technical questions could be answered better by our CTO and team. I think that wouldn't be the right time for the question. For the next question, this is very good from Mr. Yan Liu. Thank you. Quick one. Would you be open to set it up outside Singapore, as I noticed you guys are based off Singapore?
Yes. Why not? Mr. Yan Liu. As I said, right, ours is a SaaS-enabled platform, actually, right? So it is basically hosted on cloud environment, and we set it up and run it for you, depending upon which part of geography you are actually. Now, if you look at it on the left-hand side of this slide, actually, right, we have something which is a proprietary integration tool actually, using which we can connect to your internal system of records actually, be it on the ERP side or procurement systems or your planning or budgeting systems, whatever that may be, with a remote connectivity, so that the information can basically seamlessly flow from your internal system of records, which might be sitting in within your data center or in some of the other cloud actually, and then pull that information onto the onto your supply financing network, which is sitting on the the public private infrastructure actually, right? So it can be absolutely done. Happy to take it up more if you are interested. Thank you.
I think there's another question from Mr. Yan Lu. This would be great for suppliers more than the enterprises. Am I right?
I'm actually looking at it, both ways, right? The supply chain finance platforms, or the programs that organizations earlier have had, actually, they have also not become successful. And let me just quickly jump back to the slide that I was really going in. Yeah, here it is actually, right? Look at this, look at this from a point number 5 and 6, so to say, actually, right? Sorry, Shaz, what was I'm just. Yeah, sorry. That would be great for suppliers more than the enterprise, right? That's the question you had. Sorry. So I mean, yeah. So the point I was saying is that. Uh, it is not really actually for the supplier alone or for the enterprise alone, right? Because what we are talking about is that the platform, those were launched earlier, were only sitting in for the large enterprises and then maybe to a tier 1 supplier, so to say. But what we are talking about here is the enterprises who are really keen to make their supplier network more financially resilient, would be the key to really look at it, launching something like this. And now what we are saying is that with the help of these technologies, these organizations can run it in a closed environment for their supplier network, actually, right? So so the idea is to create a win-win situation, for the enterprise and also for the supplier. For the supplier, because even if the program was there, they were not able to use it because of the limitations, working with only one bank and so on and so forth. And definitely the idea here is to make it more participative, so that the multi-tier supplier can really get a benefit out of it. So so it will really help to enterprise and suppliers both. That's the point I'm trying to say.
Yet another question from Mr. Yan Lu. Is your platform in a mature stage or is it a co-development model? In stages, I presume.
Yeah, so and maybe again on the same slide, right? What I'm saying is that the platform has already gone through a development cycle, and we have reached a ready component stage where we can bring in the pieces together and then make it up and running for you. And that's all you need, a time for 6 to 8 weeks, so to say, right? So it has gone through its own maturity cycle, built on these technologies, what I mentioned. And we are also working on a couple of pilots with a few customers where we are basically doing a co-development depending upon the domain and the industry, so to say. I can pick an example for an agri commodity customer of ours, actually, right? Who have been looking to launch supply financing network for them, to all the way down to the farmer, actually, where they procure the raw material, actually, and they really want them to be included into the entire network, actually, right? So we have then gone ahead and then co-developed some UI, some mobile platform to make it more collaborative, for the farmers, down there, actually, right? So we are going through that co-development cycle depending upon the industry that customer is coming from. But at a holistic level, these modules are mature enough to make it up and running for you, so to say. Thank you.
I think that's the last of the questions. There's one question from Elnaz. I believe it will become more and more useful with suppliers, banks, shippers, and companies. I think I can take it from there. Yes, it definitely will be more better as the partners grow. But like Vinod mentioned, it's a co-development initiative, and companies have to start somewhere. And I think COVID has really accelerated that time for the companies to take that initiative. And a lot of them have already taken multiple initiatives towards that direction. I think that's the last of the questions. I would like to thank Vinod for sitting through this webinar session. I will um, post this recording into our website for people who have missed the first half of the webinar. Would you like to say anything more, Vinod?
Yes, Shaz. So thank you so much for organizing that, and thank you, gentlemen and ladies, to join in. It has been really good talking to you and having some interaction. As we go through, stay safe, stay healthy, and sorry, Shaz.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think there was some last minute questions from Shilpa as well as Vikas. For Vikas, he wants to know how do you integrate the existing ERP such as SAP in organizations? Also, wouldn't all the stakeholders in a trade need to have this for seamless output? And the second question is technical too. It's from Shilpa Shashi. How secure is the platform and safety measures taken to avoid security breaches? Could you answer the last two questions, Vinod?
Yeah, because your question around integration with the existing ERP systems, right? And that's what I was saying. If you look at the left-hand side of the picture, actually, right, where we have something called a BC Link, which is an SAP Microsoft approved ERP connector, actually, right, which can seamlessly flow in the data back and forth, from your system of records, if it is SAP, so to say, right? And that is there. From the next question of Shilpa, how secure is the platform and safety measures taken to avoid security breaches, actually, right? So we follow the guidelines as per the cloud hosting partner, actually, which is Microsoft Azure in this case. And as I mentioned, it is a private permission network where you are able to invite the counterparty in a closed environment. And then because the platform is built on a technology, something called blockchain, right? It is not that the documents are just shared the way it is, but you're able to create immutable records with the traceability and the audit trail in terms of the owners and the participants. So that is what would be that, if I answer that.
All right. I think that's all the questions. I'm going to close the question bar because I think we have extended the webinar longer than most people would want to sit through. But it's been great for everyone. It's been great having you all in the room. And any further questions, you can write to me, or you can write to Vinod, or you can reach out to anyone in our team. I think Vinod's done a pretty good job of answering every question. I'm sorry if Vinod couldn't answer the technical questions because that's going to take another 1 hour from Vinod. So I think no one wants to sit through that right now. I will have Vinod sign off, and I'll see you guys for the next webinar. Please, if you could go through our polls and our files that we have linked to this webinar, it would be great. And you could let us know what you would like to listen to next.